It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. That is the perfect way to describe what open source is right now. Because from a user perspective, it's never been better. You can take any open source software and customize it for your exact use case, for your exact taste, however you want to use it, because it's easier than ever to make a little feature or make a slight change. But from a maintainer's perspective, it's never been worse. You have floods of PRs coming in. You have all of these fake hallucinated vulnerabilities being reported to you, or maybe even exploited. You have all of your code taken, changed just enough in order to skirt around any license you have on it because it technically changes the code so it's not yours anymore. There's so much going on in the world of open source, and it's making so many maintainers and owners of these open source projects close their doors. And I'm going to walk you through all of it, what's actually happening, why it's happening, and kind of where I've landed on all of it. So let's take a look at what's been going on just this year in the open source community. And I think there's maybe no better example than Daniel Stenberg, who is the creator, maintainer of curl, which is on your phone, on your TV, in your car. I think it's on 20 billion devices at this point. So, take that, Java. But he's been in open source for, I believe, 25 years, dedicating much of his life to it and really embodying what open source really is. Yes, we can discuss the 4 freedoms of free software. There's one part that may not be guaranteed, but I think is very crucial, let's say very important in fostering community in open source, and that is contributions. That is taking help from strangers in building software that benefits both of you. Somebody that you've never known, never met, never paid, never vetted shows up with code to add a feature to your project or fix a bug in your project. And then you look it over, make sure it's good. You add it into your project and everybody wins. Call me a sucker, but I think that is such an important aspect of all of it. And that is what has allowed a project like curl to be on 20 billion devices, which is why what Daniel did just this past January should be an indicator of what's really going on. Because while curl has implemented one of the best solutions to handle this flood, which we will discuss, not even they were completely immune to what's been happening, which I will get to after a word from today's sponsor, WorkOS. So, slight spoiler to something I share later, but the idea is to stop making humans do the work that a pipeline should be doing. And that's basically what WorkOS does for authentication. Run this one command and it detects your framework, installs the SDK, and wires up the middleware for you. And with just that one integration, you get complete authentication out of the box. Passwords, social login, SSO, MFA, passkeys, magic auth, and you can style it to match your branding so it looks like your actual product, not some sort of bolt-on. But you always have to think long-term, so rest assured, it's built on an organization-first model. So when your first enterprise deal shows up asking for, any of these acronyms, and trust me, they will ask, now it's just one toggle button away instead of needing to refactor. So in other words, everything is set up for scaling. You grow into the enterprise features instead of needing to add something every step of the way. And their free plan is actually pretty insane. It's free up to 1 million monthly active users. So to get started today, click the link in the top of the description or go to jetty.to/workos. So starting back in January of this year, 2026, Daniel decided to shut down curl's bug bounty program, which if you don't know, a bug bounty program is effectively when you encourage others to find vulnerabilities in your code base and then report them to you. And if it checks out that this is a real vulnerability, you pay them. And this was a successful program. Over the course of 6 years, 87 vulnerabilities were found and patched, and over $100,000 was paid out in result. And they were seeing about a 15% accuracy rate on the reports coming in. So 15% of them were real. And you may think that's a lot of false positives in the program, and maybe it is, but when it comes to the false positives, you can assume that there's good intentions there. Like the person was genuinely trying to find a vulnerability in order to make some money as well as help the software. Reason being is that doing so would take days or longer of looking into the code base, using the software, trying to exploit it and find these vulnerabilities, and then you would put together a report, and then Stenberg himself would go through that report, see if it is in fact real, and if it is, fix it, give him some money. If not, then, goes in the trash pile. And that would probably take him, I don't know, maybe an hour or two just to kind of look through it to see if it is actually real or not. And that was always the time ratio in these bug bounty programs. It would take multiple days or longer to create the report and find the vulnerability. It may be an hour or two to see whether or not it was real. But now with, our beloved AI, that has completely flipped on its head. Now it can take you a minute or two to create one of these reports, because all you have to do is, basically, hey, find vulnerability and create a report to send over to curl, prompt it, and then let the AI do its thing. But it still takes Stenberg 1 to 2 hours to go over the report and see if it is in fact real. And when it comes to bug bounty programs, there's much more incentive to do this because you have the potential to make money. So a lot of people did do this, and it just became a flood of these reports going into this bug bounty program, as well as many others, to the point where the accuracy rating of them dropped from 15% to below 5%, and to the point where it just overwhelmed Stenberg because he was going through 20 reports where only one of them was an actual vulnerability and the other 19 were not. And it just drove him to a point of just shutting down the bug bounty program altogether. And the reason being is because he wanted to remove the incentive of submitting made up lies. And I mean, who can blame him? And to be clear, curl didn't stop taking help altogether. You could still submit security problems over on GitHub or send an email, but just no monetary reward was offered. And the PR system was left unchanged because they already had a solution in place with over 200 CI jobs that filter out bad PRs even before a human ever looks at them. More on that later. And this is just one example that happened in January. I mean, look at all of these. You see Mitchell Hashimoto, who is very much an AI optimist, meaning that he's all for using AI in a well-intentioned and measured manner, not, one-shotting a ghosty feature and then merging it without ever reading the code. And his policy is that AI-assisted contributions are allowed, but if any of it is slop, you are permanently banned from contributing in the future. Then you see TL Draw just not taking any sort of outside contributions whatsoever, just auto closes them. NetBSD, which actually wasn't in January, but actually saw this coming back in 2024, they banned AI generated commits, but not so much for the slop factor or bad code factor, and more of, we don't know who owns this code because you are prompting an AI trained on all of this other code, and we don't know if it's proprietary, if it follows our license, therefore legally, we can't take it. And I mean, the list just goes on and on. We move forward to February, and again, Mitchell Hashimoto comes up. He built a tool that he thought would fix the issue of the influx of AI slop PRs coming into open source repositories. He released something called Vouch, where the idea is if another contributor in that repo vouches for you, then we'll take a look at your PR. If not, we won't. And he's in his full right to do this. I'm not one of those people who think that maintainers are obligated to look at every single PR that comes through. You can take PRs from who you want or what you want or nobody on the outside. And I think that's fully in your right as a maintainer. But I also think that you're kind of just replacing one form of gatekeeping, meaning no AI whatsoever, like many of these other repos are doing, to a different form of gatekeeping, which is you have to know somebody in the project in order for us to even think about looking at your PR. But hold on to that. I have a lot more thoughts when it comes to that front. And then we fast forward to March, and it looks like Stenberg was vindicated because not only did he pull his bug bounty program back in January, but HackerOne, as the platform itself, paused the entire internet bug bounty program that it had, which a lot of very popular open source projects that you know about participate in this program. And since submissions jumped by nearly double, with basically all of them being really bad, they figured it was just a better idea to in the program altogether or pause it. And then in April, something a little bit different happened. So we've already seen projects close to outside contributors, but we hadn't seen this just yet. Cal.com, which was an open source scheduling tool, open source Calendly alternative. Now I guess it's just a Calendly alternative because they took their entire repo after half a decade, 5 years of being open source, closed. And the reasoning wasn't because of a flood of PRs coming in. It was because, in their words, code is no longer just read. It is scanned, mapped, and exploited at near zero cost. Transparency becomes exposure, which is the complete opposite of Linus's law. If you haven't heard about that, it's given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. So if all bugs are shallow, there should be contributions to fixing those bugs, therefore making your software safer. But they're saying something different here. Cal.com is saying that it's actually the threat now. And whether you agree with it or not, that's besides the point. But I guess looking at it from their perspective, you can see that, finding these bugs or any exploits that there may be, you used to need skill, a very particular set of skills. But now you don't. You just need a little bit of money, throw it in AI, have the AI scour the code base in hopes you find an exploit. Before we talked about to create a report for a bug bounty program, for this, potential threats. And then from May until now that we're in August, it's more of the same, but maybe on slightly different scale. Like in May, the Linux kernel, they have a private security list, and they too used to get 2 to 3 bug reports, exploit reports, whatever reports in regards to security a week. Now they're seeing over double that in a single day, to the point where Linus himself has just said it's become unmanageable. And mind you, this is the Linux kernel saying this. I understand they have particular teams set up when it comes to security, but the Linux kernel is not, a bunch of strangers getting together building these things on their spare time and nights and weekends. 80 to 90% of contributions coming in are from full salaried employees at big tech companies like Intel and Microsoft. So it's a little bit different setup. And if they're saying this is unmanageable, then it's really gotten out of hand. So with all that, you'd probably assume Linus is out here leading the charge on banning AI from the kernel, right? I mean, he's got maybe the worst report problem in all of open source, but that's not exactly the case, because just last month, Linus himself said, and I quote, "Linux is not one of those anti-AI projects. And if somebody has issues with that, they can do the open source thing and fork it or just walk away." So the kernel accepts AI assisted code. It just has to be human reviewed. And of course, you take full responsibility for the code you submit. And you know what kicked off that whole statement to begin with? Well, it was actually an AI code reviewer. There's a bot called Sashiko that's been reviewing kernel patches since March of this year. And of course, there were some devs that pushed back on it, and that's when Linus decided he needed to put his foot down defending it. And a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on how they think AI should play a role in open source. Some, it's completely, no AI whatsoever. Others, like DHH, he thinks that we should let AI agents democratize open source. And he has a full post about why, but it seems to all be derived from the viewpoint that people are no longer accepting AI contributions because of envy and because of status games. Not because of slop or the influx of PRs coming in, but because these individuals feel a certain way about their coding skills. Like, I've been developing this over the past 10, 20 years, my skills, and now any Joe Schmo can open up a PR and produce code of similar quality as me, or maybe they think it's a lot worse. But regardless, that's DHH's viewpoint based on what he wrote in this blog post. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is a crazy viewpoint. I mean, I think all of us have gone on Stack Overflow in the past decade, maybe not so much in recent years, and been faced with the epitome of gatekeeping in software engineering. It was never a pleasant experience over there if you were actually contributing to the conversation, whether it's with a question or whether it's with an answer. And I do heavily agree that programming is evolving and that there are a lot of people trying their hardest to resist this change for many reasons. So there is a lot of that in this industry. But I don't see that as the reason, or maybe the primary reason for why it's reasonable for them to no longer want any sort of AI contribution or outside contribution. In fact, I completely disagree with the idea of letting agents democratize open source, because frankly, I don't see open source software as a democracy. I see it as a dictatorship. If I'm building software, I can choose whether or not I want to make it closed or open. And if I make it open, I can choose what license I put on it to see how free it actually is. And then if I do that, I can choose who is allowed to contribute to it and what PRs I do or don't look at. So all of that to say, I believe the maintainers of these projects can and have the right, full right, to decide their anti-AI policy or gatekeep or whatever, whether I agree with the decision that they make or not. But I will say, when it comes to AI agents, it does kind of democratize, because now almost anybody, as long as you have a little bit of money, because there are some really cheap models out there, and even just a little bit of time, the barrier of entry is basically completely broken down. Now, is that good from a maintainer perspective? As we've seen, the influx of PRs that you don't really have time to look at, maybe not, but it gives more people access to building software. That is democratization. Although I do understand that money creates levels to it, access to money, as well as these private companies preventing some people from accessing frontier models without any guardrails, and other people cannot access those is also not, democratization. But anyway, this is not the point of my video. Let's move on. Wait, we can't move on just yet. I forgot democracy was my segue into my next section, and that is about Codeberg. Codeberg is a GitHub alternative, and they actually held a vote in July of the members of Codeberg whether or not projects that are mostly written by AI should be banned on the platform. And the vote was 358 yeas and 144 nays, which means that now mostly AI projects are completely banned from being on Codeberg at all. But that also raises the question, how the heck does Codeberg or any of these projects that have an anti-AI policy know whether or not a commit, a PR, was done by AI? I'm going to get to that. But first, when it comes to this Codeberg vote, again, I think they're fully within their rights. And it makes a lot of sense as to why they are doing this. Is it a good decision long term? Maybe not. I don't know. Again, my crystal ball is at the shop. I can't see into the future right now. But I understand their perspective. One, they're worried about license laundering. I mentioned earlier in this video how people will take existing open source code bases with whatever license and then have AI run through it all and change it just enough so that there's no more copyright, thus stripping it of the open source license that it had, which is not good, and also can arise some sort of legal issues. But I think the driving factor here is actually money. And I don't mean greed money. I mean, it is very expensive nowadays to buy RAM. And why is that? AI, and not just RAM, any hardware that they need. And Codeberg runs on donations. They're not owned by a giant company like Microsoft owns GitHub. So it hurts when, for example, a disk that used to cost them 700 euros just a few years ago now costs them 3,700 euros today. I don't know what that is in freedom units, but that's a big discrepancy regardless. And they need way more hardware today because it's easier than ever to use AI to help you generate, 37,000 lines of code a day and push it to your project. Oh yeah, and then you have AI scraping every website known to man, including Codeberg, which also is hitting their servers even harder. And if you take a look at GitHub's uptime, they were just out for like 7 hours yesterday, not by the time this video comes out, but Actions was down for a very long time on August 6th. And like I said, they are owned by one of the richest companies in the world. Imagine doing that purely on donations. So while a lot of people have their problems with this decision, I completely understand why they had to make it. Now back to detection. So how do any of these repos or platforms know whether or not the code being submitted is AI written? Well, they don't. If you strip out the co-authored by attribution, you remove the AI slop readmes and descriptions and a lot of those comments that they left, there's no reliable way for you to go in and tell whether or not this code was written by an AI or a human. The policies may act as a deterrent, but maybe it'll help do what I've always said should be the case, and that is let the code live on its own. If it's good code, then take it, regardless of who or what wrote it. If it's bad code, let it fall by the wayside. And if it's utter slop, then maybe you can do what the Ghosty repo does and permaban that contributor. But the thing is, if it passes the Turing test, if you can't tell whether it's AI code or human code, as long as it's good code, who cares? With a little asterisk there, if you really are worried about copyright in some of those things. Like, I understand those viewpoints, but still, how can you identify those? You can't. I bet you there are plenty of anti-AI repos out there that have a litany of AI-generated code in it. It's just simply that it passed the Turing test and they couldn't tell that AI generated it. And I can't prove that statement because we don't know if AI generated it. And that really brings us to why all of this is happening. Like, well, one, why do so many people want to submit PRs that are just completely slop? I think maybe that is a bit of a status game and they just want all of these attributions as of being an open source contributor without actually putting in any of the work. And I'm sure there are other reasons as well. But the catalyst was that open source contributions and everything else that we talked about in this video, you used to have to actually put in effort. You put in effort gathering skills. And then once you have those skills, you put in effort building out a feature or fixing a bug. But now AI has completely removed the need for all of that effort. So there's more people than ever being able to just do a simple prompt and create a single PR, and more people are doing it. But there's a very important thing to note that is different now than it was last year. And that is the slop era is more or less over. I know that's going to be a controversial statement, but hear me out. The issue used to be that all of these PRs were complete garbage and none of them were useful. And there were so many because of AI and they were so bad because of AI. But AI has, in fact, gotten better. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of Stenberg. Take the word of so many other, maintainers in open source. AI code is no longer the problem. The quality of it, that is. The problem is that it's still just as easy to do this with AI. So they're still seeing just an absolute flood of all of this stuff coming in. And the issue now is that a lot of it is actually quality. Because something that I didn't mention earlier is that when Stenberg closed curl's bug bounty program and then moved over to GitHub to take reports, well, he realized that that wasn't the best decision and actually ended up moving back over to HackerOne. And since then, even though they still offered no money, the reports started coming in again, even more than before, but now they're back up to over 15% of them being real. So before, it was easy to dismiss everything and say this is all trash, it's all slop. But now, imagine you're getting so much good help that you have to start turning it down because you just don't have the resources to figure out what you want to add in there. That's really what a lot of these individuals are facing today. And a lot of them are still having the old frame of mind of no AI whatsoever because of it. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I mean, look at what's already out there. Ghosty uses Vouch. Somebody in the project vouches for you and your PR gets looked at. So while I may have called it gatekeeping, it is still perfectly valid because it allows Mitchell to allow AI under this condition, but bans AI slop. And Mitchell, he has very good takes that I have seen. And so he has an opinion that I put a lot of value in. But if you do want to open things up to everybody, really get down to the best code wins regardless of who or what wrote it, well, curl and Ghosty, after the vouch check passes, and Bun all run rigorous CI pipelines, which this isn't anything new, but they run, 200 plus jobs on a PR before a human ever spends a single minute looking at it. And then there's fighting fire with fire, where a lot of open source projects run AI code review in the pipeline itself. Bun runs it as one of their required checks. The kernel has that Sashiko bot reviewing patches since March. I mean, there are a lot of options out there for you to do. Some people do all of these things I just mentioned. And I list them like this because, I wish I could sit here and give you a definitive solution, but I can't. Every project is different. They have a different budget, different amount of manpower, different goals with their project. So those require different solutions. But what if it were your project? What would you do? Any of these, or would you just close up shop too? But that's all I got for today. If you watched it all the way through, maybe you'll consider subscribing to the channel. I think we just hit 700,000 subscribers, or we're about to hit it. I don't know. Pretty cool milestone. Appreciate all of y'all. I'll see you in the next one.